activity and getting enough conversations with people like you talked about before is always key, right? You're not worth your salt in sales if you're not focused on having a really high number of conversations to find out who exactly could buy your product and who's a good fit and who your ideal customer is that you can serve. So
trust is extremely important, because if that person trusts you that you're going to come through when something goes wrong, right? And your reputation is out there, they have a better feeling that you're going to actually take care of them because they've heard you talk. They've heard you talk about the product. They know you're not going to try to sell them something that's not going to work for them. And trust really is everything. Whatever your tool is that you're using, when you focus on building those deep relationships with people as the foundation, then you're also getting that relational value.
it's a lot more fun than just transactional sales, but it's just part of the human experience. It's part of what we were called to do as people, as humans on the earth, is to connect with each other and grow together, and honestly, like, bring value to each other's life that can sometimes be the exchange of my product for your money, or vice versa.
So if you're being strategic about the business relationships that you're building, what I found is that you end up building relationships with the key players who all know each other, and you're going to get much better quality business from that. All right, I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today's guest is very special. It's actually my older brother, David Lewin. And if you've been in sales for any length of time, you tend to have to take this kind of me first approach where you're pushing your products. And that's kind of the way that a lot of people think about sales, is how do I have as many conversations as possible about what I do and my products and my services, and really being a lot of times product first and really trying to push your products into the market. I've been doing podcasting for a while, but one of the first shows that I helped to kick off was David's show, This Week in Drones. And it's really become an amazing tool for him to be able to take that philosophy of serving other people first and amplify it significantly. So David, I'm super excited to talk to you. Your show's been an incredible success. I'm really excited to dive into this with you today.
Come on. Appreciate it, Joe. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to talk to you about this because you really embody this, because you're in a sales role. And I think what's been really amazing is to see how you've been able to position yourself, and people don't really see you as a salesperson because you're not just pushing this product, right? And that's beneficial both for you as a salesperson, because you're building amazing relationships with people who could buy and people with influence, but it's also great for the people you're working with because you're there as a helpful resource. You're there to build connections within the community that you're working in. So I'd love for you to just outline a little bit about your philosophy around sales.
Activity and getting enough conversations with people like you talked about before is always key, right? You're not worth your salt in sales if you're not focused on having a really high number of conversations to find out who exactly could buy your product and who's a good fit and who your ideal customer is that you can serve. So I can never downplay that per se, in terms of just pure activity levels being the kind of the baseline where you start. However, I've been able to start to kind of shift that mentality and embrace a mindset of serving others, as opposed to looking at a new conversation as a transaction, running into somebody at a conference and going, hey, how can this person possibly buy from me? That's my first thought. Transitioning away from that towards people who want to get into sales, and they talk to me and they say, man, I just love networking with people. I love talking to people and I love listening to their story. If that's where they stop, I know in my head, okay, they're not going to survive in sales, because you actually do have to know how to close the deal and like bring the conversation to talk about money, to talk about like hard things that a lot of like pure networking.
You and I have always kind of gone back and forth, like sales and marketing, right? I've helped to introduce you to some marketing ideas like podcasting. And what I love is that we both kind of come closer to each other's point of view on value, building brand, building reputation, and all of those things. And then marrying that to, look, it still is a numbers game no matter what. There's only so many people who are going to be in market for what you have. There's only so many people at any given time. And so you do have to have a volume of activity. You have to have a volume of conversations. You need to build relationships, not just with 3 or 4 people, but with tens of people or even 100+ people in your industry, and be keeping in relationship with them and keeping yourself in the loop with them. And if you're not constantly doing that and having that activity, you're not going to be in a position to actually get the business when it's there, right?
You want to keep people warm. You want to keep the relationship with them warm until their buying window opens. And in sales, like I typically am involved in, they're a longer sales cycle. Maybe it takes 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, even further. My CRO joked the other day, because I had a deal on my pipeline for Q4 here coming up that's like 400 days old or whatever, or more. It might have been like 900 days old or something crazy. crazy. And he's like, this might not be the #1 record of oldest deal, created in the system that hasn't closed yet, but we're getting close. Anyway, point being, like, it came back around, $1 million deal that I've just kept warm over time. And then finally, boom, hey, funding's here. It wasn't here before, last year, the year before, but it is now. Let's move forward. And so now actually become something. And my point of saying that is it's important to find tools, thus like podcasting being an incredible tool to stay top of mind, to keep that relationship warm, where if you don't have those kind of tools, all you're left with as a salesperson is the annoying pestering, hey, are you going to buy this yet or not? And that doesn't go over so well, right? It's a lot less effective. If I have to send, 17 touch points, and they're all one-line email asking, are you ready to buy from me today or not? No. Okay, I'll get back to you again in 60 days. Hey, are you ready to buy from me or not? No. That's all about me. That adds no value to them at all. It doesn't even help them realize, why my product might help them or whatever. It just does nothing but asks for something from them, which is very ineffective. Sometimes, do it 1,000 times, and it's far more powerful to have reasons for people to remember you that are like useful to them. Maybe it's a conversation we host on a podcast where they learn something new and they go, wow, that was interesting. Thanks, David. Now I come to mind whenever their buying window opens in a year from now and they need to buy my product. They go, that guy, David, he's, I keep seeing him pop up. He keeps saying things that are really interesting that actually help me out. I want to do something for him. Maybe I'll buy his product.
Yeah. And some of that is conscious, but a lot of it is also subconscious, right? There's reciprocity that comes to play. And it's not a negative thing. Like, we as humans want to feel a relationship with people that we do business with. And it's not all just emotional. And sometimes when we're talking about these things, it can be like, oh, well, that's not how business works. And we need everything to be like very transactional. But the interesting thing is that trust is extremely important, because if that person trusts you that you're going to come through when something goes wrong, right? And your reputation is out there, they have a better feeling that you're going to actually take care of them because they've heard you talk. They've heard you talk about the product. They know you're not going to try to sell them something that's not going to work for them. And trust really is everything, especially in these enterprise deals, because there's so many different players that have to get involved, and there's so much going on that people are not only thinking about, will this product work? They're also thinking about, how risky is it to work with this company? And will I end up losing my job because I was the person who brought the wrong vendor in for something? Or will I get a demotion? Or will I end up getting a raise because I brought the right person in at the right time that was able to drive something forward? There is a factor of like, okay, if your product isn't as good as somebody else's, you may or may not get that deal, right? But the other part of it is, mitigating risk, the trust factors, your knowledge, all of that adds trust. But then there's this layer of, hey, look, if I could choose between vendor A and vendor B, and they're basically the same, anything that you do that pushes you up over the edge is a massive advantage. It was kind of when you were starting out in this new space, you were going to a lot of conferences, and then we were talking a lot about it. I'm like, David, you got to start a show and start inviting people on. So tell me a little bit about what led you to decide, I'm going to do the podcast.
I've had instances where, like, in the early days, you were encouraging me, you should just do it. You should just launch a show. And I had the old school philosophy of like, well, what am I going to talk about exactly? Like, I only have so much content, so many slide decks that I've, my company and I have put together that I could run through, to present my product. I can't do that. I can't have 100 episodes, that talk all about my product. I could do 1 or 2, but how am I going to launch a show? How do I have enough to say? And in fact, I was newer in the industry. It was 3 years ago. I was still learning. So to say, hey, I'm going to launch a show where I sit here and just share wisdom and knowledge when I'm the newer person here, didn't quite resonate. I didn't know how to do it. Meanwhile, most people online naturally just post one-way posts. So it's a lot of times it's just like, here's knowledge about myself and my product, consume it. With that, I remembered your advice. And so before I learned even what to do and what software to use, how to get it all set up, I just was like, well, let me just give this a shot. So I sent like a one-line email like, hey, I heard you have a really awesome program, that I'd love to learn more about, actually how you do things, versus like, can we meet so I can tell you more about my product? It was more just, can we meet so I can learn more about these amazing aspects of what you're doing and do it and host you on a podcast. I kind of framed it that way. Like, I'd love to interview you on a podcast to learn more and let others listen and hear and learn from your expertise. And, after 2 months of ghosting, it was like 2 seconds after I sent that email, it was like a yes, and I was like, what? Okay. What do I do? So I called you, we got, StreamYard set up or whatever, and sent a link, jumped on, and even to this day, like, that episode has like 40 views or something on it. Still, it's not like it's thousands and thousands of views, but it re-engaged them. which, later led to them actually becoming a customer, and it led to opportunity for my product.
Yeah. So one thing that I love about this, what you're sharing, and I think is really important, is you're not using this isn't I mean, technically it's a strategy, but this isn't like a tactic. It's not a sales tactic, right? This is something that is helping you to build really deep relationships in your industry, and you have quickly gained authority and built great, meaningful relationships with people. And a lot of those people are never going to buy from you. And a lot of those people might not ever even be in a position where they could buy your product. But there's business value that comes from it, which if there wasn't, then it's like you're in sales, you'd have to be doing something different, right? But then there's also a lot of personal value that comes from that, and reputational value that comes from doing the show that you don't normally get. Because if you're doing cold outreach and you're just saying, hey, do you want to buy my product? And you're just constantly pitching people, well, yeah, you're going to make some sales eventually, probably. If your product is any good and people actually need it, then you're going to end up potentially getting some business coming from that. But as soon as you send that message, it either brings value to you or it doesn't, and then it's done. Whereas when you reach out to somebody, whether it's through a podcast or writing an article with them or inviting them to an event where they're going to get to meet other peers, whatever your tool is that you're using, when you focus on building those deep relationships with people as the foundation, then you're also getting that relational value. And I'll throw this in there also, it's just way more fun. Also, it's way more fun to spend time meeting people, talking to people, building relationships, helping people achieve what they're looking to in life, and then also getting business and getting business value from it, rather than it just being something where you're saying, hey, are you ready to buy from me? They say no, and then the relationship ends there.
It's a lot more fun than just transactional sales, but it's just part of the human experience. It's part of what we were called to do as people, as humans on the earth, is to connect with each other and grow together, and honestly, like, bring value to each other's life that can sometimes be the exchange of my product for your money, or vice versa.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll throw in there that's just a personal joy of mine that I get from running a show is getting to create opportunities for other people. And there's so much meaning that comes from that, because I meet people all the time. So lots of benefits that come that aren't just making sales. So if you're being strategic about the business relationships that you're building, what I found is that you end up building relationships with the key players who all know each other, and you're going to get much better quality business from that. Because when you're doing the transactional stuff, the primary people you're going to be able to reach and get in front of are people who are also very transactional, not people who are really relational. And they become the most difficult clients to work with. And so people who take a very transactional approach, they don't have friends in the industry. And so all they can do is wait for the sales guy to reach out or go to Google or, fill out a download. Whereas the people who are really have built strong community and strong relationships in their industry, they're first going to go to their peers and they're going to go, hey, who do you know who's dealing with a problem like this? And what did they do? And when you're in that circle, whether it's through a podcast or you're at events or whatever the case is, it really sets you up in a position to be able to get the business that's really high quality and not just kind of the leftovers for the people who haven't built those great relationships.
Big time. I want to say this too. It's the one who is just transactional will forever be seen as a vendor per se. And so if you're just a vendor, then how can I get a deal from you? And also, I'm not going to send you to my friends. Like, I'm going to send a vendor who I know is going to have that commission breath and all that negativity, that's just going to like pound them and ask them for the deal and be annoying and offer no value. You want to start the relationship at the highest level of value and then work kind of backwards, and you start on the complete other side of the spectrum at a much higher level of value where you're saying, hey, do you want to come on my podcast where you can be promoted and highlighted and your thoughts can be heard by many others and they can learn from you? Now you just added a tremendous amount of value to their life, to their career. You offered them something, you gave them something that was meaningful to them.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute perspective on that, and I agree. I mean, that happens when you're working at a job too, right? If you come in an entry-level position, you can eventually work your way up, but it's very difficult for somebody who's much further up the chain to take your ideas seriously. But then you could end up getting a role that's equal to that person a week later, share the exact same idea, and somebody's going to take you so much more seriously because you're starting at that level of value and they haven't seen you as being this low-level person that's trying to give you advice. You're seen as a peer. And that's another thing that's amazing about the podcast is that you build authority and people start seeing you as a peer in their industry, even if you're not, and I've actually had multiple times where I've hosted shows that I know nothing about the industry at all, and I'm able to talk competently and people start seeing me as knowing what I'm talking about, even if I don't, right? So there's kind of this hidden value there of being able to really quickly build authority, and then you learn, right? And you actually, that's another one of the kind of hidden values, is you're meeting all these amazing people who are super smart and have great ideas, and you're getting really good at pulling those ideas out. And now you actually do really quickly become an authority in the space because you know everybody. So you're able to make the connections. And then you start really quickly learning from the top people in the industry exactly what they're doing. And so you're able to learn 10, 15 years worth of information in a couple years because you're talking to all the right people who are doing cutting edge stuff, right?
I just want to use a phrase here for people to walk away with, which is credibility by association, right? Is kind of what you just described. Maybe a little bit of a jargony way to say it, but it's a nice way to sum that up. You grow in credibility in the market by who you're associated with as well.
So what's your encouragement to people who are on the fence?
Well, it depends on what your job is, I suppose. But if you're in enterprise sales, if you're trying to scale and sell something that you know has value, then I think you can't afford to not invest the time into something like this, like doing a podcast, where it just puts networking with many, many people on steroids. You know, it's exponential networking.
You can't think of this as being something in addition to what you're already doing. What are some business development things that you're already doing? Because you're probably doing something. This is only extra if you're not doing any business development at all. So it can give you that short-term revenue bump. That is possible if you're going to treat it as business development and you're going to really reach out to a lot of people. But then you also get all of those long-term relational benefits, trust benefits, people coming to you at the trade booth. But it's so much better if you have a line of people who are waiting to talk to you when you're at the event. And if you speak, if you do podcasting, if you do stuff like that, you're going to have people who come to you. And that's a much better position to be in.
It's so effective. So now, if you're in sales, you're supposed to be doing those outreaches. Well, now you just have another tool and a much more powerful, meaningful way to get a quote unquote, sort of touch point. And you need like 15 or 20 of those or something, whatever the stats are for someone to buy. So this just gives you a good, 10 reasons to reach out to them over the next year that are thoughtful and meaningful and useful to them. So to your point, it's not extra time. Those are touch points I was supposed to be making anyway, according to my job description. So now I just got to do it in a much more fun, effective, meaningful way. And then you're hosting discovery calls and Zoom calls all day anyway. Might as well just stream one of them live once a week and let other people listen in and benefit from it. That's literally all it has to be.
Another aspect of this I think is kind of cool is, for one, you invite somebody on a show. You're reaching out to them. That's one touch point. Then you're coordinating the show. That's another touch point. Then they're coming on the show. That's another touch point. And then you're probably going to follow up with something after that, even if it's just, hey, thanks for coming on the show. That's another touch point. That's a lot of extra interactions that you're having with that person. And sometimes it could be over the course of a month or two, right? And so you're filling up these touch points with somebody and building that warm connection multiple times while they're coming on the show. And then, for a lot of people starting out, I don't always recommend that they're spending a lot of time on clips and stuff like that and posting, because that does get to be more time consuming. But when you get into that, now you're sending them clips ahead of time and then they're posting it on their channel. And now, your touch points are going even further. So when you have somebody on a show, if they're not in market or they're not a customer, there's a very good chance that they're going to refer somebody to you. And I've actually at this point gotten as much or more business from people I've had on my show who end up referring me to work with other people, and they refer me into their network. And so what kind of discovery call are you going to hop on where that person goes, hey, this isn't a good fit for me, but here's somebody else? That's almost never going to happen, right? But I've had that happen on the show all the time. That is a regular occurrence with people who come on the show, is to get those referrals like that.
The longer you do it, the more you're in this mentality, the more that you get that flywheel, and you got enough business coming in on one side of the funnel, and then you can just focus on building meaningful and deep relationships with ideal customer profile type folks, within a good, have a strategy about who you're reaching out to. But if they're in a bucket where, hey, they could eventually buy, or they could refer me to somebody, and anyway, you can just, it's great. You could focus more and more of your time on just serving and being, a help and a light to other people. And, eventually the market catches up on that level of value that you're inputting. Eventually your income matches that level of value. We all have to kind of reset and restart for different reasons, multiple times. But when you're kind of in that restart, it's hard to believe that sometimes, because all you see is just like the empty pipeline and the number of transactions you need to have earlier on in your career, if you start to just embrace the wisdom that we're sharing even before you've experienced it.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the best questions, if you don't want to be salesy after the show, which usually doesn't work out that well anyway, like in certain circumstances, the person needs what you have, it's a great fit. You finish the show and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to talk, because I think we can really help you with that. Like sometimes that happens, and that's great when it does, but that's the exception. And if you try to lead in with that all the time, you're just it's a Trojan horse, and they're going to see that, and nobody's going to come on your show anymore. But a great way to end your show after you're done is just to go, man, this is awesome. How can I help you? What are you trying to do? And then they're going to tell you. And if they have something you can help them, you introduce them to somebody awesome. Or if what they need is something you can help with, you go, actually, that's what I do for work. Why do we schedule another? Would it make sense for us to schedule another call and talk about it? Yeah, let's do that, right? Or they go, no, I don't need anything. And then what's the next thing they're going to say? How can I help you? And then that gives you the opportunity to think about what you need. And maybe it's an introduction to somebody. Maybe it's, hey, this is what I do. Do you know anybody who would be a good fit? Maybe it's, hey, I'm trying to get more people like you on my show. Do you know of anybody who would be a good guest? And then, you've already added value wherever you can. And then a lot of times people are just going to offer that value right back to you, and it moves along great. So anyway, we could continue going, but David, this is super fun having you on. How can people find out more about you and This Week in Drones and everything you're doing over on your side?
Well, for sure. And before I share that, I just want to say thank you. And I want to point people your way because Joe helps others start podcasts like what I started with This Week in Drones. He taught me everything I know. So if you're out there and you want to give it a shot, give Joe a call for sure. And otherwise, just find me on LinkedIn, David Lewin. Yeah, love to help out however I can.
Awesome. Thanks again, David. Really appreciate you coming on the show. And thanks everybody for joining us live. And we'll see you guys again next time.